majority in the Senate were explaining this to foreign journalists who can't understand why he wasn't convicted with a 57 to 43 vote, a 14 vote margin. Well, you need 2/3, but I think that we successfully prosecuted him and convicted him in the court of public opinion and in the court of history. He's obviously a major political problem for the Republican Party, and as long as he's out there attempting to wage war on American constitutional democracy, he's a problem for all of us.
He's showing no remorse with this acquittal. And by what have we done? Have we now given a permission slip to political violence in our everyday politics?
Well, certainly, those 43 Republicans in the Senate shamefully did that. Now, a number of them, including Senator McConnell, are aggressively trying to disentangle themselves from the vote. McConnell went right to the floor to say he was convinced that Donald Trump was morally and physically responsible for this attack. I mean, I would have liked to have had him on the impeachment managers team based on the way he presented that, except then he went back to the completely counterfeit argument that the Senate couldn't conduct a trial of Trump's impeachment, although he was impeached during his presidency for acts committed in his presidency. And I think we showed to the satisfaction of the country that that was done when the country first started. It was done in the Belknap decision after the Civil War, and there's no problem with it. And yet they decided to hang their hat on that very dubious hook in order to basically cater to Trump and the forces within the party that are still loyal to him in a really cultish and dangerous way.
I want to get to 3 specific what-ifs, okay, or backseat driving that people might be doing. Maybe you're doing it to yourself. What if number 1 is this? When it was clear that the trial wasn't going to start until after Joe Biden was inaugurated, was there any thought of taking an extra week, an extra 2 weeks, before starting the trial for you to do more investigating?
Well, actually, we did take an extra 2 weeks. It was supposed to start before that. Nobody said to us, nobody on any side, that we didn't make our case. It was absolutely overwhelming and meticulous and comprehensive. I don't think anybody can watch that without coming away saying Donald Trump incited that violent insurrection. He named the date of the rally. He named the time of the rally. It was timed with the counting of the Electoral College votes. He said, "Stop the steal." And then he basically, fired the cannon of the rally goers that he had gathered right at the Capitol. So, look, when you listen to what McConnell said or what Senator Capito from West Virginia is saying, they're saying, look, the facts were there. They're not disputing that. They're just saying, we don't think that we can prosecute a former president. They would have found some way. You can always slice the bologna real fine to come up with some way to acquit somebody if that's what you want to do. And in fact, that was the whole strategy of our opposition counsel. They were saying, well, you can pick due process, you can pick First Amendment, pick whatever you want, just pick one reason to let him go. And, and 43 Republicans did.
All right, on witnesses, it seems as if this was a last-minute decision to go ahead and try to call Jamie Herrera Butler. Should you have had a witness plan much sooner that might have included Mike Pence, Kevin McCarthy, Jamie Herrera Butler, Mark Short, people like that?
Okay, well, let's start with Jamie Herrera Butler. She issued her statement the day before, and we tried mightily to get in touch with her. We just wanted her to, she could have come and just done an interview. We couldn't get through to her, and so we did seek permission to do it.
Why did you wait? I don't mean to interrupt you.
We got a vote.
Can I interrupt you on this real quick?
Yeah.
Why?
Please.
Her story was known for weeks. Why did you not try to contact her until the last couple of days?
No, she issued her statement the day before,
right.
And we brought up the resolution right at the time that the resolutions for witnesses were called for according to the Senate resolution. There's no other time we could have done it. That was the moment to do it. We won that vote. We were going to proceed to do it, and then the Republicans stipulated to allow the evidence to come into the record. Now, you ask about some other people who might have gotten up there and lied. We don't know what Kevin McCarthy would have said. I mean, that was her record of what he was telling people. What he told people was that he had called Trump to say, you got to get us out of this. Hell, these people are here. Trump said, it's Antifa. McCarthy said, no, it's not Antifa, Mr. President. It's your people. You got to get us out of here. To which Trump said something like, well, maybe they just care more about the election than you do, i.e., Trump knew exactly what they were doing. He knew that that mob which he had deployed was there, occupying people's offices and threatening Congress. So it was there for everybody to see.
Right.
So we could have had 1,000 witnesses, but that could not have overcome the kinds of silly arguments that people like McConnell and Capito were hanging their hats on. They're trying to have it both ways, but
one more of those what ifs: insurrection versus dereliction of duty. And I know you made a pretty compelling argument, I think, in your closing argument about how you couldn't disaggregate them. But if it had been dereliction of duty, it looks like you might have gotten 2 or 3 others.
Remember, these Republicans who voted to acquit in the face of this mountain of unrefuted evidence were going to find some reason to do it. So if we had charged dereliction of duty, they would have said, that's not an impeachable offense. You've got to deal with that within the military system. The president is not bound by the Code of Universal Military Justice and the Uniform Code of Military Justice and so on. I mean, you can always come up with a lawyer's argument to get to where you want to go. And they did not honestly confront the reality of what happened to America, which was Donald Trump incited a violent mob to attack the Congress of the United States. So you know what? We have no regrets at all. We left it totally out there on the floor of the U.S. Senate, and every senator knew exactly what happened. And just go back and listen to McConnell's speech. Everybody was convinced of the case we put forward, but, as the defense lawyer said, just pick any one of these phony constitutional defenses and then you can justify it. It could be First Amendment, it could be Bill of Attainder, it could be due process. All of them are nonsense. I thought that I successfully demolished them at the trial, but there's no reasoning with people who basically are acting like members of a religious cult, and when they leave office should be selling flowers at Dulles Airport.
Congressman Jamie Raskin, I hope it brings you some solace that many of us are grieving and mourning with you and Sarah and your family. I know it's never going to get easy with that. So with that, sir, I appreciate you coming on and sharing your views with us this morning.
Well, thank you for your kindness, and thank you for having me. And I want everybody to hang tough for democracy. We won on a vote of 57 to 43, although we didn't make it to 2/3. And there are a lot of patriots out there hanging tough for the Constitution.
All right, Congressman Raskin, thank you very much. And joining me now is the #2 Democrat in the Senate. It's Dick Durbin.
Centers, grocery stores, schools, restaurants, and many other great amenities.
We also were able to move at the beginning of the trial nominees forward. We voted in the Education Committee and Labor Committee 2 of the nominees during the morning last week. So we've been doing 3 things at once. We've been moving the COVID negotiations, we've been continuing the confirmation process, and we've been dispensing with these articles of impeachment.
Your colleague, Republican Senator Ben Sasse of Nebraska, who voted to convict former President Trump, said in a statement, quote, "Here's the sad reality. If we were talking about a Democratic president, most Republicans and most Democrats would simply swap sides. Tribalism is a hell of a drug, but our oath to the Constitution means we're constrained to the facts," unquote. Is he right?
I have a lot of respect for Ben, but I don't think he's right. I do think that this cult of personality that's been built up around President Trump is fundamentally different. I really don't believe that Democrats would rush to the defense of a president of our party that was essentially trying to overturn an election. Something has happened inside the Republican Party in which they have decided to abandon democracy. They are no longer defending the right of the people to choose who should be president. I don't think that would happen inside the Democratic Party. To an extent, Senator Sasse is true. We have become too tribal. I mean, we have lost the ability to sit down and negotiate big things together, and we should have a conversation about how our campaign finance system, how our method of drawing districts in the House of Representatives, how the news media as constructed today pushes us apart. But I don't think there's an equivalency between how Republicans have acted to try to overturn democracy and how Democrats would react if a president of our party was trying to do the same thing.
Senator Chris Murphy, Democrat of Connecticut, good to see you again, sir. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks a lot.
After the heavy majority of Republicans give President Trump a pass, where does the GOP go from here? Republican Maryland Governor Larry Hogan, never afraid to call out Trump, joins me next. Plus, back to school without an outbreak, the CDC now telling you how to make that happen. The CDC director will join me live to explain why the science says it's safe. Stay with us.
I made found myself returning to this big wooden box that was filled with letters that I'd received from all kinds of people over the years.
From that chest, she chose 22 letters and hit the road with her dog Oscar for a 100-day, 15,000-mile reset ritual. Meeting strangers she felt had something to teach her about healing, like a professor named Howard in Ohio.
You get immersed in life again. Let's face it, life can be good.
A joyful, fearless teenage survivor in Florida named Unique.
I want to go on a food binge and just eat crazy things like octopus.
To imagine yourself in the future is a radical act of hope. And I want to be more like that girl.
An inmate in Texas named Little GQ who'd written from death row and affirmed the power of connection.
And one of the first things he said to me was, what did you do during all those years in the hospital? And I said, I got really, really good at Scrabble. And he looked at me and he kind of laughed and he said, me too.
Her struggle to heal is the subject of her new book, Between Two Kingdoms.
The title of the book is a reference to the brilliant Susan Sontag, who talks about how we all have dual citizenship in the kingdom of the sick and the kingdom of the well, and it's only a matter of time before we use that other passport. But the place that I found myself at was neither.
A crippling limbo, especially when it came to love. Which is where that Bandcamp buddy comes in, who kept at it with his music and got himself a pretty good job years later.
Hey everybody, welcome back. Say hi to John Baptiste.
It was really hard for me to imagine a future with John when I couldn't imagine myself existing in the future yet.
What has she given you in terms of lessons about life and love?
You have a limited time. Get to it. I think that is the biggest lesson. Embrace the imperfection.
Their history was just what her heart needed to trust again.
And at every turn when I thought, there was some aspect of this illness experience that was going to scare him away, he was right there.
You're like a Renaissance woman.
Suleika Jawad's road trip may have ended, but her journey has not. And she knows that struggle will always be along for the ride.
Are you healed?
To say that I'm healed would be to imply that there's an end point. And I think healing is something that we all do, that we'll all continually do for the rest of our lives.
Last year, Subaru...
He worked well with President Trump. I think his speech is an outlier regarding how Republicans feel about all this. I thought the impeachment trial was not only unconstitutional, I condemn what happened on January the 6th, but the process they used to impeach this president was an affront to rule of law. He's the first president to ever be impeached without a lawyer, without a witness, without ability to confront those against him, and the trial record was a complete joke, hearsay upon hearsay, and we've opened Pandora's box to future presidents. And if you use this model, I don't know how Kamala Harris doesn't get impeached if the Republicans take over the House, because she actually bailed out rioters, and one of the rioters went back to the streets and broke somebody's head open. So we've opened Pandora's box here, and I'm sad for the country.
Does Donald Trump bear any responsibility for the attack on the Capitol on January 6th?
No. In terms of the law, no. He bears responsibility of pushing narratives about the election that I think are not sound and not true. But this was politically protected speech. The speech on January the 6th was not an incitement to violence. Every politician has used the word fight hard. So I don't think that he caused the riot. His behavior after the election was over the top. there was a pre-planned element to this attack, Mr. Wallace, that we need to look at? Did Nancy Pelosi know on January the 5th that there was a threat to the Capitol? What did President Trump do after the attack? We need a 9/11 commission to find out what happened, to make sure it never happens again. And I want to make sure that the Capitol footprint can be better defended next time. So I want to look at what Pelosi knew when she knew it, what President Trump did after the attack, and on the Senate side, was Senate leadership informed of a threat? So there was a pre-planned element to this attack, totally unconnected with the speech. And I thought the managers failed miserably in making the case.
Let's pick up on something that you specifically talked about. Let's look at the timeline of what happened that day, especially after the riot began. At 2:24, the president tweets, "Mike Pence didn't have the courage to do what should have been done to protect our country and our Constitution." 2 minutes later, at 2:26, the president speaks to Senator Tommy Tuberville, who tells him Vice President Pence has been evacuated from the Senate. Around that time, the House Republican leader, Kevin McCarthy, calls the president, pleading with him to do whatever he can to call off the rioters. When the president says he thinks that it was actually Antifa that was involved, McCarthy told Republican Congresswoman Jamie Herrera Butler that he had to persuade the president it was his own folks who did it. Take a look at this exchange.
These are your people. You know, they have MAGA hats on. And the president's response to him was, well, Kevin, I guess they're just more concerned about this election than you are.
What does that tell you, Senator, about how the president viewed the riot while it was happening?
Doesn't tell me a whole lot because it's all hearsay. Why don't we have a 9/11 investigation? I think it's at 2:28 he told people to be peaceful. He tweeted out several times at 4 o'clock. He did a video basically to be peaceful and leave. Could the president done more? Yeah. Did he incite this riot by his speech? Absolutely not. If Donald Trump's speech is going to be seen as incitement by a politician to call violence about every Democrat and Republican up here is in trouble. But I'd like to know that. I'd like to know, did the Capitol Hill Police form the House Sergeant at Arms and the Senate Sergeant at Arms the day before the attack that they needed more troops? So I want to look at all of it.
Senator, I want to just pick up on that because, and the question of the president's personal responsibility, whether it was legal or not, whether his personal responsibility, here's what you said on January 7th, the day after the riot.
It breaks my heart that my friend, a president of a consequence, would allow yesterday to happen. And it will be a major part of his presidency. When it comes to accountability, the president needs to understand that his actions were the problem, not the solution.
His actions were the problem, allowed the riot to happen. It sure sounds like you're saying that he violated his oath of office.
No, I think what he did is he encouraged supporters throughout the country to fight like hell to take back an election that he thought was stolen. A lot of politicians have said that. On January the 7th, he wasn't impeached. The guy was impeached within 48 hours. He didn't have a lawyer, no evidence gathered. The speech of January the 6th is politically protected speech, in my view, did not cause the riot. It doesn't represent the 74 million people who supported him. This will be part of his historical record of the Trump presidency. But Democrats, because they hate his guts, wanted to impeach him before they ever met him, have now started a process that you can impeach somebody in the House within 48 hours without a lawyer, without a witness, without the ability to cross-examine those against you, and have a trial record based upon articles from the media. This thing is turning into a nightmare for the presidency. I rejected the article of impeachment. I didn't think President Trump was guilty, and you have now opened up Pandora's box. As to Senator McConnell, he is a friend, but he's going to be center stage now in the 2022 effort to take back the Senate. I've been asked by a lot of people, Chris, calm President Trump down. talk to him, get him to calm down. Sometimes he does and sometimes he doesn't. But to my Republican colleagues, this is a two-way street. 90% of the Republican Party thought this impeachment was a partisan exercise. That's what I thought. He is out of office. And so to the Republican Party, if you want to win and stop a socialist agenda, we need to work with President Trump. We can't do it without him. And to you, President Trump, you need to build the Republican Party stronger. I'm into winning. And if you want to get something off your chest, fine, but I'm into winning.
Senator, I just one final question. Nikki Haley, the former governor of your state of South Carolina, made some pretty tough comments about Donald Trump this week. I want to put them up on the screen. She said he went down a path he shouldn't have, and we shouldn't have followed him, and we shouldn't have listened to him, and we can't let that ever happen again. Senator, is Governor Haley wrong about Donald Trump's future in the Republican Party?
Yeah, Donald Trump is the most vibrant member of the Republican Party. The Trump movement is alive and well. People believe that he brought change to Washington. Policy-wise, it was long overdue. All I can say is that the most potent force in the Republican Party is President Trump. We need Trump plus. And at the end of the day, I've been involved in politics for over 25 years. The president is a handful, and what happened on January the 6th was terrible for the country, but he's not singularly to blame. Democrats have sat on the sidelines and watched the country be burned down for a year and a half and hadn't said a damn word, and most Republicans are tired of the hypocrisy. So no, Nikki's wrong about President Trump. North Carolina, the biggest winner, I think, of this whole impeachment trial is Laura Trump. My dear friend Richard Burr, who I like and have been friends to a long time, just made Laura Trump almost a certain nominee for the Senate seat in North Carolina to replace him if she runs, and I'll certainly be behind her because I think she represents the future of the Republican Party.
Senator Graham, thank you. Thanks for coming in today. Please come back, sir.
Thank you. I will. Thank you.
Up next, what did Democrats get out of the second Trump impeachment trial? We'll ask Senator Amy Klobuchar when we come right back.
To veteran spouses everywhere.
Right, definitely. So there are a lot of questions here also about the Supreme Court and the investigation into Brett Kavanaugh. So one of the questions is,
quote, unconscionable, but trial was unconstitutional. On social media and via text, you're weighing in. Emma in Texas says this: there's a little future for the Republican Party. Trump has done what he set out to do, destroy the Republican Party. Claire in Louisiana said, should President Trump win the next election, he would serve 4 to 8 years if reelected. I am thrilled that Trump was acquitted. However, his future in politics is done as far as being elected. GOP will go another direction, says Kent in Iowa. And this one, the impeachment trial managers claim President Trump caused the riots. In fact, the unrest of the people was caused by 5 years of Trump bashing by media and the media and lies by many in Congress and false investigations. Mr. Trump will not run again, but will influence candidates. That's Mike in Florida. In Newcastle, Pennsylvania, this is Shirley on the Republican line.
Thank you for taking my call. Now, I'm 82 years old, and as far as I'm concerned, President Trump was the very best president that this country has ever had. And reason being, he was all about peace. He was all about peace. He was trying to bring peace all around the world. And that is so important. Fighting doesn't get you anywhere. He was a businessman. He knew how to make things happen. And one thing I'll say, whether he was tweeting or whether he was talking in person, whatever he said was the truth, and you could take it to the bank. And that's the thing that I appreciated most about him. So we better pray that if we don't get Trump back, we get another person like him that will run this country properly. And you know, I voted for Bush twice. I'm so sorry. He took us into a war that we're still fighting 20 years later. And how many American lives were lost because of him? So, you know, in the future, we always need to pray first and then go to the polls and vote for the person that's going to do right by the American people. Thank you so much, and God bless you.
Okay, to Frank in Mahopac, New York, independent line.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm a former elected official in Putnam County, New York. And if you listen carefully to McConnell, isn't it sad what he and Ryan were doing since the first day Trump got into office? They deliberately wanted to make sure he wouldn't succeed. Trump was exposing the greed, the country club activity of the establishment. And that includes the Republicans as well, the never-Trumpers, the rhinos. He was exposing that. He had 75 million people vote for him. How dare McConnell look back in the 4 years and hold Trump responsible for bad deeds? He knows darn well Trump was exposing him, his China connection, his profit, and all the other establishment who've been living cozy in Washington for so many years. I hope Trump comes back in 2024 because you know what? He was exposing this all, and it hasn't even been partly done. Just listen to the vitriol and the hatred that is being set out in these various activities. And they know darn well they've been trying to bury Trump, the Democrats, since day one. Yet McConnell, Ryan, Romney, Sass, Burr, you name them, they deliberately worked with the Democrats. And I'll tell you one thing, being a former elected official, Trump would have won on November 3rd, but because the Republicans behind the scenes joined with the Democrats, that's why he wasn't successful. They stopped all of the reform in the states, especially the swing states, to make sure the voting was done properly. So shame on McConnell. He's a disgrace to the party. He lost his majority and his extra pay, and he tries to blame Trump for losing Georgia. Believe me, he's lost. Trump will come back, and I hope he does, because the American people need a person who works for them, not for China, not for the country club, not for all the other activities that these frauds do, and never represent the people.
Story this morning in the Washington Times about the White House press office, the deputy press secretary, T.J. Ducklow, resigning, the headline, resigning after threatening a reporter. They had put him initially on suspension, but Jen Psaki, the White House press secretary, saying that we have accepted the resignation of T.J. Ducklow after discussion with him this evening, that is as of yesterday, and reported abusive remarks against a reporter from the Politico organization. Ed's next in Bowie, Maryland, Democrats line. Go ahead, Ed, you're on.
Okay, thank you for taking my call. Just if you can bear with me. Basically, the immediate future of Donald Trump is he's going to be a thorn in the side of the current administration from day one. He's going to try to find ways to cut and basically almost take down the whole country in the process because he's very vindictive. The other piece is that basically the Republicans, to a person, probably have all been under Steve Bannon's cover or watch in terms of getting dirt on them and basically using that against them if they turn against Trump. Look at Lindsey Graham. Look how much he's aged over the time frame he's been in office. Basically, Lindsey can't afford to say anything. It's not just about politics. It could be about something that Lindsey might have done illegally. And then lastly, I would like C-SPAN to do a split screen of the Black Lives Matter protest in terms of the police beating on the people and what led to the Black Lives protest. You know, the 8 minutes of torture of George Floyd, tortured to death, and then do the protest riot, or whatever you want to call it, of January the 6th, led by a cartoon character named Captain Caveman, who actually went in there and they destroyed the place, including doing some inhumane stuff on the floors and everything else, and they were there to kill people. And it was pre-planned. Trump was part of pre-planning in terms of making certain that on January the 6th, that he was going to try to really fix this country and fix even his own people for what happened in terms of the election. So basically,
You know, people say, I heard somebody say that Trump is all about peace. He's about peace everywhere else but here in the United States. He is a dictator. He told Bob Woodward, I rule by fear. I love fearing, putting fear in the hearts of people. And he did it to his own people to keep them in check. And kudos to the courageous people beyond the fear who stood up and said no. Oh, I'm sorry. One other last thing. The bar to impeach and remove is too high. 67%. It takes 67% to remove somebody. That was a victory for this country. That's 57 out of the 100 voted to remove him.
Ed mentioned one of those who voted to acquit, Senator Lindsey Graham, and a political article about his possible future and his talks with the former president, Donald Trump. The headline, Graham to meet with Trump to talk about the future of the GOP, and there we go. They write that Senator Graham says he'll be meeting with former President Trump in the coming weeks to talk about the future of the Republican Party. The South Carolina Republican told reporters Friday evening that he plans to encourage Trump to work with Republicans to ensure they take back the House and Senate in 2022. Wendell's next in Sulphur.
Up to about a foot of snow falling across areas of Oklahoma. Ice eventually across coastal areas of Texas. And then take a look at that pink there. It's going to be really treacherous travel conditions. Stay off the roads if you at all possibly can. In fact, you're not going to be able to get anywhere on that kind of ice. All right,
Matt,
guys, send it right to you.
I got to see if I can get there.
Thank
if
you,
I get
Rick.
to Texas. I have perishable items for Valentine's. I must arrive in Texas today. Hey, you know what? It's not just Wise Guys. It's on Fox Nation. You can also get the American Icon series. I participated in the latest one, which is Gerald Ford, an American icon. We talked about Gerald Ford, his football career, his presidency, and ultimately his loss to Jimmy Carter. Listen to this.
President Ford innately understood that any great competitor knows how to lose with dignity. On January 20th, 1977, the nice guy from Michigan watched the peanut farmer from Georgia succeed him as the next president of the United States. The two men both shared mutual respect for one another.
Here's a clip from American Icons, Gerald Ford. It's streaming on Fox Nation. Is there any other presidents who played D1 football? I don't know that there is.
I don't think so, Will. And he's also the only president never to get a vote as a vice president or president, but was still president.
Hey, I've looked into it. I don't really know what's going on with this plant behind me. Did you ever decide? What are you growing?
Didn't you?
What do you in the corners of the office? I don't understand, Dave, what you're growing. I mean, that's. Are you surprised this is on television?
You didn't do any investigation, Will?
I looked. It's suspect, Pete. It's very suspect.
It really does. It's questionable. Have it removed.
I like it.
Yeah, it's very green of you, Will. I didn't know you'd be a green guy, but it's good. All right. Coming up, the Biden administration demanding accountability and transparency from the WHO, the World Health Organization, and its investigation into the COVID-19 origins and how Will's plant got there. But will their deep concern translate into tough policy? We're going to ask Maria Bartiromo. And who will come out on top at today's Daytona 500 on Fox? We will chat with 2015 champ Joey Logano before the race.
Necessary to expose all of the evidence and not being in a hurry. I mean, I'm guessing that if you were president and you were accused of inciting an insurrection, Republicans wouldn't do a 4-day, 5-day trial without witnesses. They'd drag it out to hurt you.
Certainly. I mean, and you have to remember, you know, there are calculations that people have to make in regards to time and how much of, you know, the work that we have to do will be taken up by this. There is so much pain and suffering that's happening with the American people, and you know, we do have other pressures of people telling us to get them the COVID relief that they need and to get on the work on behalf of the people as well.
No, definitely, and that needs to be done, although there's a separate debate about the filibuster preventing a lot of that work and the rest of the Biden agenda getting done. I'm just checking, you were in favor of getting rid of the filibuster, right?
Right. I mean, and that's really now what we have to do. We need to dramatically reform our democratic institutions. We have to end this filibuster. We have to ban gerrymandering. We have to make sure that we are removing substantial barriers for voting for low-income communities and people of color. We have to end the dominance of unchecked corporate power in politics. There's a lot of work that we can do.
And on that note, we're almost out of time, but I do want to ask about the work that you're doing, unrelated to impeachment, but important. You and Senator Elizabeth Warren, among others, last week co-authored a letter to the Biden administration calling for a review of U.S. sanctions as a foreign policy tool. You say it's causing humanitarian suffering. Briefly, we only have 30 seconds left. How is it causing suffering? Where?
In so many places. We know that it's going to be really important. The Biden administration has already taken a first step to do a review, and we're asking them to do a comprehensive review and get rid of, sanctions that are counterproductive. We know that sanctions often are a tool that is used. We don't check whether it's going to work or not, and oftentimes it hurts the people in those countries that we are trying to help. And what we are asking is for this administration to take a holistic look and get rid of those that are harmful and counterproductive to what we are trying to accomplish as a country.
Well, we'll have to leave it there. Unfortunately, we're out of time. Thank you so much, Democratic Congresswoman Ilhan Omar of Minnesota. I appreciate you taking time out this morning. Don't go anywhere. We have more to unpack from the Senate's verdict yesterday. More news on all of that in just a moment.
Still pre-qualified student loan refinance rates.
Always ready, always there. Visit now.
That if you have been vaccinated and you are exposed, and you're exposed within 3 months of your vaccination, that's similar to if you've been exposed within 3 months of disease, that you need not quarantine. As data emerge on many of the questions that you're asking, we will update our guidance in real time.
We're seeing a lot of states. We've just had a dip these last 2 weeks. It felt like the first week where we took 2 steps forward and 1 step back rather than 1 and 2 back. But a lot of states are getting rid of their mask mandates already. Is it too early to be doing that?
Absolutely. We are still at about 100,000 cases a day. We are still at around 1,500 to 3,500 deaths per day. The cases are more than 2.5-fold times what we saw over the summer. It's encouraging to see these trends coming down, but they're coming down from an extraordinarily high place. And as I said earlier, if we want to get our children back to school, and I believe we all do, it all depends on how much community spread is out there. We need to all take responsibility to decrease that community spread, including mask wearing, so that we can get our kids and our society back.
And including mask wearing well. I'm very glad that you guys gave a little bit of a lesson on that. I know people will go to your website, get more lessons about that as well. Dr. Walensky, it's been a year. We didn't ever got the head of the CDC for the last year. It's nice to have the head of the CDC on Meet the Press. Thank you very much.
Great to be with you. Thank you.
Make sure to check out our interactive state-by-state guide to figure out when and where you can receive your COVID vaccine. Visit planyourvaccine.com to learn more. When we come back, one very good reason the Senate was so divided on the impeachment vote. Stay with us.
Dana Faba failure at his Los Angeles home. The publisher of Hustler magazine, Flint gleefully challenged taboo after taboo. His raunchy and demeaning depictions of women were widely denounced. While Flint's ultimate Supreme Court victory against a libel suit brought by the late Reverend Jerry Falwell won Flint a reputation as something of a free speech champion. He spoke with Aaron Moriarty in 2014.
Would I do all that stuff over again? Of course not.
You would?
But I'm glad I did it. Hell yes.
Paralyzed from the waist down after a 1978 shooting, Flint spent the rest of his life in a wheelchair. Larry Flint was 78. Mary Wilson died Monday at her home in Nevada. A founding member of the Supremes, along with Diana Ross and Florence Ballard. Wilson was part of a Motown Records powerhouse. The Supremes had a dozen #1 hits in the 1960s, along with success success came stresses and changes. Florence Ballard was replaced by Cindy Birdsong in 1967. And Diana Ross left in 1970, leaving Mary Wilson as the sole original member when the group broke up for good in 1977. She went on to a long solo career and published an autobiography in 1986. I thank you very much. 2 years later, the Supremes were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. In a statement, Diana Ross said, "The Supremes will live on in our hearts." Mary Wilson was 76. And jazz rock fusion pianist Chick Corea died Tuesday at his Florida home. The son of a trumpeter and band leader, Corea forged his own course in music, dropping out of both Columbia and Juilliard to pursue his passion on his own terms. In 1968, he joined the Miles Davis Quintet as a pianist, and in 1971 formed his own group, Return to Forever. Corea declined to be pigeonholed into any one category, as he told Sunday Morning's Dr. Billy Taylor back in 1990.
If I can conceive of something with my imagination, why can't I do it? I should be able to do it.
Corea recorded nearly 90 albums and was named a National Endowment of the Arts Jazz Master in 2006. He won 23 Grammys and 4 Latin Grammy Awards, and could win a posthumous Grammy next.
My new normal? Fewer asthma attacks.
Less oral steroids.
Us lives. And then his administration hid that data from the public. Cuomo issued an executive order changing the advisory on May 10th, requiring patients to test negative before returning to their nursing homes. But that was obviously too late for those already infected. Last August, New York legislators pressed Cuomo for more information, and that's where this latest private admission, this latest development in the scandal from his secretary Melissa DeRosa comes in. She said that the data was withheld because, quote, right around the same time they were asking for it, President Trump turns this into a giant political football. He starts tweeting that we killed everyone in nursing homes. He directs the Department of Justice to do an investigation into us. Basically, we froze, unquote. In a public statement Friday, she also blamed the second wave of the virus for the delay in reporting. But this all fit in perfectly with what Governor Cuomo himself said on January 29th when asked about the damning report from the state attorney general.
It's not about pointing fingers or blame. It's that this became a political football, right? Look, whether a person died in a hospital or died in a nursing home, it's the people died. People died.
But where those people died and why they died, and if they died because of Cuomo's March directive, that is information in the public interest. And fear of political enemies using the data against you, that's not an excuse for covering it up from the public. This was Democratic New York City Mayor de Blasio's reaction after reading about DeRosa's comments in the New York Post, which broke the story.
It's a really disturbing report. It's very troubling. We've got to know more. We now need a full accounting of what happened. Think about seniors who their lives were in the balance.
Because of your decisions, thousands of people died who did not have to die, tweeted a Democratic state legislator. This is a betrayal of the public trust, wrote another. This is criminal, said yet another. Among the governor's chief critics is New York Congresswoman Elise Stefanik, a Republican who refused to hold Trump accountable for the loss of life under his watch because of the mishandling of the pandemic or the January 6th MAGA terrorist attack at the Capitol. Stefanik, in fact, helped spread Trump's big lie. So you might find it difficult to take seriously Stefanik's stated outrage. Because if you're only upset about bad, even fatal leadership decisions and behavior based on the partisan affiliation of that leader, you're not operating from a place of righteousness, you're operating from a place of craven self-interest. Which brings us back to what happened in the U.S. Senate. Yesterday, and frankly all week, the Trump defense team lied to the senators. They berated the senators. They made claims about Trump that we all know to be false. about an attack on the Senate that could have killed any of them.
Former President Trump's actions preceded the riot were a disgraceful dereliction of duty.
And yet, Republican leader McConnell and 42 other Republicans voted not guilty, some of them denying to this day what we all saw with our eyes and heard with our ears. One wonders if anything would have been different had the mob actually achieved their desired end and, God forbid, actually hung Mike Pence. I honestly don't think so. Now, the situations with Governor Cuomo and former President Trump are obviously very different. But I will never understand the instinct that prompts someone to check the party affiliation of those acting abhorrently or indecently before figuring out how they should react. It would be nice if every elected official could behave as if indecent behavior is empirically indecent behavior, no matter the party affiliation of the one responsible. Dead bodies, they're all just as dead. For leaders not lacking in courage, join us tonight for a new CNN original series that chronicles President Abraham Lincoln's life.
Of what Audie said. She's basically didn't see what you and some others on the panel saw. And that really is sort of Donald Trump's future in the party. I guess if he's a stock, would you buy it? And let me introduce you two facts here. Josh Mandel, the new front runner for the Ohio Senate seat, went full MAGA in his announcement to replace Rob Portman. And the infotainment bullhorns all still belong to the Trump wing. Is this still a bad time to be Donald Trump?
Chuck, the Republican Party is still a willing hostage of Donald Trump today. There's no doubt about that. However, there is a lot of evidence that that power of the Trump movement, that influence is waning, and we're going to see this play out over the next 18 months, right? Mitch McConnell, a strategic mind with Liz Cheney, with other establishment Republicans, against Donald Trump and his movement. Which will win? We'll see. That Trump lane is going to be available to a lot of Republicans, especially in primaries. How many candidates run in each primary? That's going to have a big impact on all of this. But this is the battle that's going to play out over the next 18 months. I think we will have the answer by the time the November 2022 elections are here.
And Casey, is that the real measuring point that we'll find out? Are they within his grip or not? 2022, the real measuring stick?
It's going to be an important turning point, Chuck, but I also think the big question is, what is Trump going to do ahead of 2024? Because he really could hold some of these would-be presidential candidates who want to inherit his voters hostage to his own intentions. I think the big question is, can former President Trump stay focused enough on these goals that he says he has to actually make a real difference? And whether any of these Republicans like Josh Mandel can actually credibly carry that banner. And don't forget the point that Senator McCaskill made, which is that there is this open invitation to investigate Donald Trump in the courts, and we simply don't know how that's going to play out.
Claire, let me
notes. You said that you noted some reactions. I mean, you're inside there, and we don't get to see the reactions that you do. What kind of reactions did you see, like when the videos were shown?
Lisa Murkowski, she's a Republican, kind of an independent Republican from Alaska, visibly angry when some of that video is shown of what took place on January 6th, the insurrection at the Capitol. Other senators just transfixed by the video, some of which we had not seen before, because some of it was that footage that was put forward by the Senate in terms of their hidden cameras. And so that kind of thing made an impact, I think, on many senators, in the sense that it's still fresh in their minds, Greta. It only happened a month ago.
Thanks, John. And John and I had a lot more to cover, and you
outline for everything. There was 1 year, 2 years ago, where I wrote, I think it was 2,700 pages.
Slice it about 3/4 of an inch thick. The custard into which you dip your French bread, your brioche, is made of 6 fresh eggs. Whisk this up with a fork. Good things are a very important part of my life. This French toast is a good thing. And during this entire segment, I'll probably say good thing 44 times. So bear with me. Add whole milk, granulated sugar, and a pinch of salt. And don't forget, most importantly, some Grand Marnier. I like to add, a couple tablespoons. Any orange-flavored liqueur will do. I thought we would also use blood oranges in our custard.
Disturbing attempt to poison a Florida.
The ups and downs of frequent mood swings can take you.
He seems like a complete outlier. Look, I like you, I worry about the shift to the far right, Carol. I wonder how democracy can survive in a two-party system where one of the two parties is no longer committed to democracy or free and fair elections. But we'll have to leave it there. Carol Anderson, Professor and Chair of African American Studies at Emory University. Sadly, we're out of time, but appreciate your insights this morning. That does it for me. Thank you all for watching. My friend Ali Velshi took some much-deserved time off, but he'll be back at the helm next weekend from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern. In the meantime, you can join me this week for my own news program. The Mehdi Hassan Show airs weekdays at 7 p.m. Eastern on NBC's streaming network, Peacock. Stay right where you are because the Sunday Show with Jonathan Capehart starts right now.
Donald Trump is acquitted again. House Impeachment Manager Stacey Plaskett joins me live to talk about the case and its outcome. Trump declares his MAGA movement has just begun. Former Trump fixer Michael Cohen is here with his assessment. And what happened to Blue Lives Matter? I'm Jonathan Capehart, and this is The Sunday Show. Donald Trump has evaded conviction once again. While the vote at his Senate impeachment trial was the most bipartisan in American history, 7 Republican senators joining all 50 Democrats in declaring Trump guilty, it was not enough to reach the 2/3 majority necessary to convict. After a day rife with political theater and backdoor deals, Democrats were ultimately allowed to enter into evidence a Republican lawmaker's incriminating account that alleged Trump sided with the insurrectionists. But while it further cemented the Democrats' argument, it ultimately did little to deter Trump's stronghold on the Republican Party. Case in point, this damning speech from Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell given mere minutes after he voted to acquit Donald Trump.
There's no question, none, that President Trump is practically and morally responsible for provoking the events of the day. No question about it. The people who stormed this building believed they were acting on the wishes and instructions of their president.
After McConnell explained that he voted to acquit only because Trump was already out of office, here's how House Speaker Nancy Pelosi responded in a fiery surprise appearance at the Capitol yesterday.
So for him to get up there and make this indictment against the president and then say, but I can't vote for it because it's after the fact that he established that it could not be delivered before the inauguration.
House Impeachment Manager Congressman Joaquin Castro perhaps summed it up best when he said this.
The defendant, President Donald John Trump, was let off on a technicality. And that's essentially what you heard Mitch McConnell say, that they let him off on what they perceived at least to be a procedural issue. And you also heard Mitch McConnell go up there and say, essentially, that we overwhelmingly proved our case, that substantively Donald Trump is guilty of inciting an insurrection.
Joining me now is another House Impeachment Manager, Delegate Stacey Plaskett of the U.S. Virgin Islands. Delegate, I'm calling you Congresswoman. Congresswoman Plaskett, thank you very much for coming to the Sunday Show. I have to ask you this at the outset. How surprised were you by the not guilty verdict for Donald Trump?
Not surprised, but of course terribly disappointed.
I want to dive right into the whole question of witnesses and what happened yesterday. Everyone, well, by everyone, I mean, it seems like a lot of Democrats are on fire over the fact that a vote was held, have witnesses, and yet you and the other House impeachment managers opted not to call for witnesses. Why?
Well, going back, Jonathan, and thank you for having me, and happy Valentine's Day to you.
Oh, same to you.
The House managers proved at the closing of our argument overwhelmingly the elements of the articles of impeachment. There was no question in the American people's mind that, in fact, this president was guilty. Additionally, we had witnesses who, in their own testimony, in their own words, you heard from police officers who said what their experiences were when you heard Manager Swalwell give an account of the attack on the police officers. We, at the last minute, got information about our colleague, Jamie Herrera Butler's statement and what was said to her by Kevin McCarthy. And we wanted to get that in. So the strategy was do the motion for witnesses at the time that the motion of witnesses were allowed, negotiate, and get that statement in. And we were able to do that. As you recall, the defense counsel was saying that they wanted to bring 100 witnesses after that. I mean, Lord, would I have loved to have had Kevin McCarthy come on, but we all know that that was not going to happen. What we wanted to do was get the statement in, have it read into the record out loud for the senators to hear. But at the end of the day, it wasn't more witnesses that we needed. It was more senators with spines. And that's what we saw, that they did lack the fortitude. They were more concerned with their seat in power, afraid of Donald Trump's base, to be more concerned for our democracy, our Constitution, the American government, and even the body of the Senate.
You know, there's reporting that you, and by you, I mean the House impeachment managers, reached out to Vice President Pence, reached out to Mark Short, who was on the Vice President's staff, seeing if they would come forward to testify. One, did you ever hear back from them? And two, how concerned were you that some of the witnesses you could call would actually be detrimental to the case you presented?
Well, let's recall from the impeachment 1, right? Impeachment 1.0 of this president. And we are still in court litigating for the testimony of McCann. That is an ongoing litigation for him to do his deposition. Americans need to also remember that this is not subpoenaing someone and they come and stand on the Senate floor and testify. This is a deposition. And then that deposition is played in front of the Senate for the Senate as well as Americans to hear. We knew that they were going to be hostile witnesses, that there would be a long, protracted time period in which we would have to fight in court to receive that testimony. And then the testimony was going to be a deposition. Defense counsel would also speak with them. And these are not honest people. Kevin McCarthy has changed his story multiple times about what happened. Vice President Pence, his own president came after him and tried to assassinate him, and we're still waiting to hear from him. What does that tell you about the fortitude of these individuals, about their loyalty, never mind to the Constitution and to the American public, but to their own sense of honor and manhood, if I will even put that out there?
Okay, then. Congressman Plaskett, last question for you, and that is this. You're a former prosecutor in the Bronx, if memory serves. Do you think that justice will be served, or at least Donald Trump will be held accountable by the court cases that are out there in New York, in Georgia, and then the lawsuit from E. Jean Carroll? Do you think that he'll be held accountable by those means?
Well, first, I want to say that we are terribly concerned about what happened, not only to the House, not only to the Senate and to our staffers, but to our police officers, to the Capitol Police, who every day protect us, who gave their lives for us. Those individuals, Goodman saving people, Officer Sicknick giving his life for us here in the Capitol. And so they need to be honored. Those individuals need to be honored, and everyone who was a part of that need to be held accountable. And so as a former prosecutor, a former Justice Department official, I would never tell someone how to run their case. But I say God bless New York, Georgia, as well as the District of Columbia as they go after who will be in history from this case. All the world will know that this is the most insidious, fascist-loving individual to ever hold the office of President of the United States.
And never, President Trump's attorney, Michael Van Der Veen, is being threatened now for defending the former president. He had a horrible day yesterday, and his family, he told Fox News last night, his family, his business, his law firm are all under siege right now. The words traitor were painted outside of his suburban Philadelphia home. I mean, Alan, you were part of President Trump's first impeachment team. I want to get your reaction as well. But first, you, Jim Jordan. Yeah, go ahead.
This is McCarthyism. This is McCarthyism.
Yeah. And we have to fight back against this every time it happens. We've all had it. We've all got death threats. I mean, this is ridiculous. This cancel culture is so dangerous, and we have to push back. On the day we had the impeachment vote on the House floor, I told my Democrat colleagues, I said, the cancel culture won't just stop with Republicans. It will come after all of us in the end, and that's why we all have to push back. And it took Maria, all of 13 days for that to be proven true, when the San Francisco Board of Education said the Dianne Feinstein Elementary School will no longer be named after Senator Feinstein, a liberal icon. Not good enough, because 37 years ago, she said something the cancel culture doesn't like. That's how ridiculous, that's how dangerous this is. And the latest one is Mr. Van Der Veen, who did a great job defending the president. He's faced it now. But if we don't push back on this and stop it and stand up, as Mr. Dershowitz said, stand up for the Constitution and the First Amendment, it will only get worse. And so this is the number one issue for the country to address today.
It's true, Alan. I know you have also been a target. So have I with the hate speech on Twitter. How does this end? I mean, how do you stop this constant bullying?
We fight back. Cancel culture is quickly becoming American culture. You know, Common Cause, which purports to be a liberal, not a radical organization, has now demanded that Facebook keep Donald Trump off its platform. We getting liberals, Nicholas Kristof of the New York Times, saying Fox should be taken off cable networks. It's a call for censorship. I grew up during McCarthyism. I hated communism, but I defended the rights of lawyers to defend accused communists. And I defend today every lawyer. And if any lawyer is the subject of this kind of McCarthyism, I will represent you pro bono. I will represent you in front of universities, in front of bar associations. I'm going to dedicate myself to making sure that the new McCarthyism of the hard left doesn't become American culture.
I love that you're doing that, Alan. Thank you for that. Let me just ask you both.
Also mentioned in the book, DNA got the Golden State Killer. And if you could just talk for a minute about that, that's the other side of where DNA can be a force.
Trying to hold the line.
Proud to be a part of an extraordinary team of managers led so well by Representative Lead Manager Jamie Raskin, and of course we were supported by a terrific team. It felt like the gravity of the Constitution was resting on our shoulders. Many have said that the Constitution is a precious thing, that democracy is a precious thing, and it's fragile. So what we did, and I think we did it very well, was we put forward the strongest case based on the evidence in the law and the responsibility of this president, that the president just absolutely abandoned his oath. I'm very proud of what we did. It felt very sober and solemn. I will say that as the vote was taken, I was standing in the chamber as the vote was taken, and you know that each senator must stand and say his or her vote, and what they said was either guilty or not guilty. It was powerful to hear the 57 guilties. And then it was puzzling to hear and see Mitch McConnell stand and say not guilty, and then minutes later stand again and say he was guilty of everything. History will remember that statement of speaking out of two sides of his mouth.
You saw Senator McConnell and others, as I just talked to Dr. Cassidy about, suggest that President Trump should face possible criminal charges or could face possible criminal charges in the future. Several of your colleagues have said the same thing. Do you believe that those charges should be pursued?
I have to admit I'd rather stay in my lane. And the lane that I'm in, I'm very proud that the House impeached this president a second time. We brought forward an article of impeachment. We tried the case with a conviction of believing in our country and our democracy. I'll leave criminal charges to those who are expert at that.
Explain what happened with witnesses. I know you had a long night Friday and early morning Saturday morning trying to decide what to do. You secured the vote to have witnesses and then agreed instead to stipulate that Congresswoman Herrera Butler's statement could be put in the record. Some Democrats say you caved. Your response?
Not at all. And I give a lot of credit to Representative Herrera Butler for coming forward with that information that revealed the state of mind of this president, that when he is being called, desperate calls to help, to send troops, to send help, to protect the Capitol and to protect the joint session of Congress and his own vice president. What was his state of mind? He was more concerned about his so-called big lie and the rigged election. So I give her a lot of credit. We didn't need more witnesses. America witnessed this, that we were in a room full of witnesses and victims. We needed no more witnesses, but what we were able to secure was a stipulation by the former president's lawyers that what she had said was true. It was entered into the record. Further witness of the high crime and insurrection incited by a president.
Minutes later, the president's lawyer denied that on the floor of the Senate.
Well, the president's lawyers really struggled. I think the world witnessed that. They struggled with their own credibility. They absolutely struggled with legal arguments. They struggled to understand or even recognize the gravity of the evidence. I thought their performance reflected really their client.
Final question, on this question of a 9/11 style commission, is that something you believe the House and Senate should pursue at this point?
Think about it. For the first time in however many years, we had an insurrection incited by the President of the United States, where 5 people died. More have died since. Hundreds were injured. People lost fingers, lost eyesight. The House was desecrated. The Capitol was desecrated. People were terrorized. This was incited by the President of the United States. Of course there must be a full commission, an impartial commission, not guided by politics, but filled with people who would stand up to the courage of their conviction, like Dr. Cassidy.
Congresswoman Dean, thanks for your time this morning.
Thank you, George, for having me.
Sure. We're joined now by Democratic Senator Chris Coons of Delaware. Senator Coons, you just...
And were attractive, and they took as their wives any they chose. All right, now, some people read that.
Of those of cancer, how their world stopped.
Get fast relief here.
Travel ban reports the Biden administration is considering restrictions between states due to the new outbreaks of the highly contagious new strains of COVID-19. Joining me right now is the governor of the state many people have been flocking to, Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida. Governor, it's great to have you this morning. Thanks very much for being here.
Good morning.
Florida has been the #1 destination currently searched on the Travel Zoo website. What would a travel ban domestically mean for Florida?
Well, one, it would be unconstitutional. It would be a political attack against Florida. If you look, Maria, right now, you hear this debate over schools. Florida schools have been open the whole school year. We have, every parent in Florida has the right to send their child to in-person instruction. Every worker has a right to work and earn a living and put food on their table, and every business has a right to operate. And consequently, our state is doing very well compared to these other states in terms of education and economy. But we also have 26 other states in the District of Columbia that have higher per capita COVID mortality than we do. We have 28 states that have higher per capita cases than we do for the bulk of the pandemic. And if you look right now, states that are always held up by people in Biden's administration, like New York, have way higher per capita patients hospitalized for COVID right now. So there's no basis in medical, there's no basis in economics, there's no basis in reality to do this except to punish a state that is doing it better than what his experts have recommended. Biden is a lockdowner, his advisors are lockdowners. Lockdowns don't work. We've demonstrated that. We're not turning back, Maria, and they will not be able to get away with targeting Florida.
Florida has been open for several months, and you have prioritized seniors. You have prioritized ensuring that kids are in school. Assess the situation in Florida over the last year. I know home construction is up, home sales are up, economic growth. How is Florida doing?
Well, as you can imagine, March, April, when everything was grinding to a halt, I mean, we had a lot of problems like anyone, particularly because tourism stopped. But since then, we now have an unemployment rate that is significantly less than the national average. We had 25% increase in home sales year over year, 2019 to 2020. If you look at the top 25 places where new home construction is taking place at the highest levels, a plurality of those are in Florida. I think we have 6 or 7 of the communities. The #1 place in the country for new home construction by far is the Villages retirement community, which has thrived during the pandemic, even though, of course, seniors are more vulnerable to COVID than the bulk of the population. So we have a lot of great trends. And I would also say, Maria, you have lockdown states that are putting people out of business. We focused on lifting people up, but by doing that, you actually have new entrepreneurs coming to start new ventures. New restaurants are opening in Florida. New hotels are opening in Florida. And so people view Florida as a place where they can follow their dreams. It is a free state. We are doing a lot to focus on protecting elderly people from COVID. We vaccinated, I think, about 1.75 million seniors so far. About 40% of all seniors in Florida have gotten a shot. We're doing it every day, continuing until we get all the seniors who want a shot, get a shot. So there's a whole bunch of things we've been doing for COVID, but at the same time, you know, we've lifted our state up, we've saved our economy, and I think we're going to be first out of the gate once we're able to put COVID behind our country.
What about this concern about the new strains? Nearly 350 cases of the contagious COVID variant have been reported in Florida. Governor, how do you read that? Is there a reason for concern here?
So first of all, well, we obviously look at all the data that comes in, but this strain is in blue states, and they don't talk about doing anything with blue states. We do a lot of analysis and genetic analysis on strains, so we find more than probably some other states do. But here's the thing. Since the beginning of January, visits to the emergency departments for COVID-like illness in Florida is down over 60%. Cases are down. Hospital census is down 30 to 40%. And so you've seen a decline in COVID in Florida, and our winter high was much less than the summer high, but you've seen a decline all over the country. And so it'd be very odd to do a draconian travel restriction, which has no basis in the Constitution, at a time when all of these indicators are going down. And we really believe by focusing on seniors first for vaccinations, we're going to be creating a protective shield for our vulnerable population, so that if the season changes and you start to see virus increase anywhere, that our vulnerable population will be protected. At the end of the day, that's really what matters. If you're not really vulnerable to this, then that's not as significant as somebody who has comorbidities or is very elderly. And so we're trying to focus our resources where the risk is, and I think that's the appropriate way to do it.
Right, you've been adapting to this. We have to live with it. I want to take a short break.
Phase. How do you see biometrics being used?
And Peter, James, and John, and led them up a high mountain apart by themselves. And he was transfigured.
That makes me so...
Hey there, Robert Larson here.
Viewer understands that or knows that and knows that we call ourselves non-denominational. Viewer.
David, I wonder about the hollowness of the Republican Party today and whether it dates back to something you described in your first book, Dead Right. You pointed out that finally Reagan comes into office, and this is the opportunity they've been waiting for since Goldwater to cut government spending. But it turns out they realize the voters don't actually want them to cut government spending. And that, at that point, the Republican Party leadership realizes that
they basically have to fool their voters. And it seems to me that everything that's been going on since then has been this problem with that the Republican leadership knows that deep down, its voters want something very different than what they want to propose.
And their voters have been shrinking. Republicans have lost a lot of the suburbs. And districts like the congressional district that was represented by George H.W. Bush, the district that was represented by Newt Gingrich, the district that was represented by Eric Cantor, all of these districts went Democratic in 2018. These are high-earning, well-educated districts. I think the answer to the question you posed, Ann, about the future is to think about it this way. Think of yourself as an ambitious Republican officeholder. You have two, at a state level, there are two paths back to power, the easy way and the hard way. The easy way is to simply rig the system in such a way that the people who don't want to vote for you, young people, people of color, poor people, that they're not allowed to vote, or they're prevented from voting. The courts will let you. That's been one of the big changes since 2010. The courts will let you. So if you can do that, that's easy. You don't have to change anything. If we take away that option, if the courts change, if the system change, then Republicans have to win power the hard way, which is by winning multi-ethnic coalitions around the new issues of the 21st century. That takes thinking, that takes innovation. Obviously, people don't like to work if they don't have to. So make them do it. And if they are made to do it, they will discover, as right-of-center parties have discovered in Britain, in Germany, in Canada, and Australia, that you know what? There are a lot of multi-ethnic voters for your message. One of the most hopeful things for Republicans in this cycle was the discovery in the state of California. There is a majority in California, one of the most liberal states in the union, against racial preferences. That is what the Republican Party of tomorrow could look like. Multiracial, multi-ethnic, facing new kinds of issues. But first, they have to be told the easy way, the way of preventing people from voting, that way is debarred.
And I have just a minute left. I just want to ask you your thoughts about a conservative party that has managed, it seems, to make this transition, Boris Johnson's Tory party. The Conservatives in England are probably the oldest and most successful party in the world at incorporating new trends. I think you were once Boris Johnson's editor at The Spectator, so do you think he's managed to pull something off here?
I was his colleague, not his editor. The issues in Britain are a little bit different. I don't think that there was a significant, part of the Tory party that was ever anti-democratic. We didn't have the anti-systemic problem in quite the same way. But yes, you're right. What they did was they stole the Brexit issue from the far right. They put it at the center of the party, and they managed to win elections that way, partly because their opposition was so weak. I mean, I do think the verdict is still out. It will be a year or two before we know how people feel about Brexit and how they feel about what the party has done. But you're right, that was the tactic that they chose.
All right, we have to leave it at that. Totally fascinating conversation. Thank you both. We will be back. We're talking about COVID, vaccines, variants with Tom Frieden.
We all have our
of Donald Trump issuing himself sort of a pocket pardon, a pardon that he granted himself in secret. One, is that something that a president can do? And two, is that even legal? Chuck, then Joyce.
Yeah, so great question. The Constitution doesn't preclude a secret pardon. The Constitution doesn't require a written pardon. The Constitution's limits on pardons are only two. That it be for a federal offense, and that it not be in cases of impeachment. That's it. That's all the Constitution tells us about limitations on pardons. So could there be a secret or pocket pardon, Jonathan? Possibly, sure. By the way, it would not protect him against any case brought by a state prosecutor. So we talked earlier about Georgia or the state of New York. Even if there was a pocket or secret pardon, it would not preclude charges by state officials.
Joyce, you get the last word.
So I tend to agree with Chuck. Chuck is actually the one who's always right on these matters. And there's been a lot of speculation about private pardons. I think because there are Official Records Act that requires certain items to be documented in writing, that probably someone in the new Biden administration would have stumbled upon at least some notation of a pardon like that taking place. But beyond that, we have this entire notion of whether a president can self-pardon. Legal scholars agree that that's very likely a pardon that would not stand up, and so we could actually face the specter of that finally being litigated in federal court if the former president was charged criminally by the Justice Department in, say, the Southern District of New York, whereas the unnamed, unindicted co-conspirator in the Michael Cohen case, one might think that there was a federal prosecution lurking. So lots of interesting possibilities on this front, lots of potential jeopardy for the former president.
Or as he's known in SDNY, individual number one. With that, we're going to have to leave it there. Chuck, we'll be back in our next hour. Joyce fans, thank you very much for coming to the Sunday Show.
Thanks, Jonathan.
The sisters-in-law will be here next. Stay with us.
It's shown up where it was supposed to be. So I think by and large, the Warp Speed team did a great job. Now, if we get more Pfizer, if we get more Moderna, if we get the Johnson & Johnson, we're going to be able to scale this up even further. So we're hoping that that's happening. So what I would say is stop blaming your predecessor. Stop playing politics. Let's work together to figure out how we increase the number of doses available and we can get those shots in the arms. I'll tell you, Florida and other states have done a good job. The hospitals, their machines down here now. We have other test sites, drive-through sites. We have them in retail pharmacies and supermarkets and in Walmart. And so you have a big infrastructure available. If you increase the doses available to the states, you're going to get even more shots in arms.
Governor, let me ask you, you are now on the front lines. Many people say it's the states that are on the front lines in terms of pushing back on these executive orders coming out of the Biden administration. We know what the AG of Texas is doing, suing the administration to stop the deportation freeze, and we know a bit about what you're doing, pushing back on big tech. Talk to us about Florida's fight against big tech, the conservative cancel culture that we were talking about in the first segment with Congressman Jim Jordan and Alan Dershowitz. What can Florida state legislature do to hold big tech accountable? What are your plans?
I think we could do a lot. One, we could support Floridians' data privacy. Maria, if you buy a phone, you think you paid the money, you have the phone, and that's the end of it. They are constantly pulling data off your phone. They're selling it. They make hundreds of billions of dollars a year on that. Consumers should have the right to opt out of that, and they shouldn't have their data taken without their consent. We also don't want big tech interfering in our elections, whether that means deplatforming a candidate like they did to President Trump, or whether they're suppressing information like they did with the Hunter Biden story. So we want our elections in Florida to be free from that, and we have penalties if big tech tries to meddle. And then deplatforming and censorship. They put themselves out as these open platforms, and they have always, these terms of service, they're always changing them. They don't apply it fairly across the political spectrum. That, for us, is considered, we think, a consumer fraud. So we're authorizing suits under our consumer fraud statute to be able for individual Floridians to bring against big tech if they get censored or deplatformed, and our state attorney general to do it as well. So they need to be held accountable. They have way, way too much power. They're not using it in a way that is constructive for our society. So I think Florida's leading. I think we've had a lot of interest from other states. There's going to see a lot of other states, I think, follow Florida's lead. You do need to do some of the things federally, like you talked with Jimmy Jordan about in the previous segment, whether that's antitrust or Section 230. But there is a lot the states can do, and we're going to continue to pursue that in the state of Florida.
You are also pursuing something along the lines of the rule of law as it relates to rioting, right? You had mentioned that the last time we spoke. You were going to do something this upcoming March.
Yeah, so the legislature meets March 2nd, and we're going to have the strongest anti-looting and anti-rioting legislation in the country. It's going to apply regardless of why you're rioting. I don't care which team you're on. We're going to stand for the rule of law in the state of Florida. But if you are doing things like looting, if you're assaulting cops, if you're doing all these things that we saw over the summer, in many cities in the country. In Florida, you're going to jail for that. We are not going to tolerate it, and we look forward to passing that, and I think it'll be good for the state.
Governor, it's good to see you this morning. Thanks very much. We'll be following up.
But when any new tool comes into the toolbox of society,
Our second in command was
right as it ice across the region enough to make the roads.
Moments come to us when we ourselves are alone with God in prayer in the midst of the mountaintop places of life or in the midst of the valleys.
Leaving the stage. He is a narcissist. He is not leaving the stage. He's made for the microphone and the camera, and he will dominate it, and you guys can't shake him.
Well, listen, I think that the challenge for the leadership of the party in the future is to separate message from messenger. You know, the people who will make a mistake are the people who are going to throw the baby out with the bathwater and say everything that he did and everything about him is wrong and bad and we must dispense with it. The people who are going to make the mistake on the other side are the people who are going to try to play both sides
What
of
is
the middle.
the it that holds that base to Donald Trump? Isn't it about personality more than it's about policy?
But George, no, I think for a lot of those people, they like what he did. Now, and there are a lot of people who I've spoken to who say, I don't like him, but boy, I like the way he pushed some of those people around down there and the way that he got some things done.
You would agree. I mean, in the last month, the Republican Party, by Republicans, has taken a 15-point drop. This is a problem for, thank God, for the Republican Party. That is a big problem after an election.
It is a problem, but it is the early days of a new administration. And look, Joe Biden gave a great inaugural address. He preached unity, and the first thing he's done is push a COVID bill and refuse to negotiate with Republicans on anything.
Making her happy.
Oh my God! No, I mean,
yes, but
look, if we can't get 10 Republicans to agree to impeach the president for something we saw on tape, how are we going to get 10 people to come, 10 Republicans to come over for a package to say
the loyal opposition
I really do worry about that.
going to have a lot of material to work with over the next couple of years. And so if the minorities in the House and the Senate can come together and put one foot in front of the other every single day and fight the Biden agenda, that will help the party move forward. It's not going to solve our problems overnight, but it's what needs to happen until there is a new standard.
Well, the question is, what does this mean for Joe Biden? Ron, you have a piece in the Wall Street Journal this morning. Hey, listen, it looks like this COVID relief bill is going to pass as a partisan vote. So how does the president build on that promise of a bipartisanship, given that fact?
First of all, and that's okay that it passes that way, as I say. But the fact is, you've got to get your scorecard on bipartisanship bigger than just one piece of legislation, because it was a core piece of your character. And authenticity as a chief executive is key. One, appoint Republicans, in other parts of the administration, not cabinet.
You didn't do it in the cabinet.
Yeah, but there's other places. It's a big government. Two, like in 2007, take the minimum wage, which probably won't make it through reconciliation, pair it with Republican small business ideas, send that bill passed in 2007, 80-14. Third, any changes to the reconciliation, include Republican ideas and highlight it for the public. And fourth, and he obviously knows this because the first meeting he had was with Republican senators and the public took note. And then the fourth thing, embrace, even as Ron Klain has, Romney's ideas on the tax credit. Because in my view, you cannot take a blow to your character, and bipartisanship was not a political tactic. It was a part of who he was.
But he hasn't done it yet.
On the progressive side.
It will, because the very first thing he did was let Republicans in, and the first thing they did was lowball the offer. And then he said, we need to make sure we take care of impeachment, and then they didn't show up in the way that they should have. So the idea that he has a majority he needs to show up for the American people. 2022 is around the corner. Push through the agenda that you need to push through. Say the Republicans weren't there, they weren't serious about it, and they need to be replaced. Because right now, if he does not get big things done, he's going to be held to account.
It's not either or. That's what McConnell wants him to do.
Republicans will take this much and make this much happen. Democrats have this much and act like they can't get anything.
This is why Sarah and I are alive and well, okay? This is why. This is why. Because right now, George...
At least we're fighting about this and not what you guys are fighting. You guys are fighting about insurrection and we're fighting about health care.
You clearly have the moral high ground. I understand. Here's the thing. Right now, 3 weeks into a new administration, the Republicans are operating in a vacuum. There's nothing to respond to yet because Trump has overridden that because of the impeachment and the way it was done. Now, we're not going to be operating in a vacuum. We're going to be responding to this fight.
And one of the things you were saying is actually the impeachment trial did help you thought Joe Biden.
I did help Joe Biden, there's no question, because it forestalled our ability to be able to respond to things that we think are not right for the country. So I have nearly the pessimism that my buddy Rahm has about the Republican Party.
Is that your Valentine's to me, buddy?
Yes, that's as good as you're getting. I just really believe that when the Republicans will recover, is when the Republicans get back on talking about the things that they believe in, things they want to talk about, and get away. I've had to come on this show for 4 years, and your first question to me always is about something Donald Trump said, did, or tweeted. That's not going to be the case over the next couple of years. It's just not. And no matter how much Rahm wants to continue to think that Donald Trump's going to dominate the party, he's not going to dominate it that way from a personality perspective.
Now it's going to be Marjorie Greene.
People. Well, listen.
In the last month, last month, you had either Donald Trump, Congresswoman Greene, or Republicans going after Liz Cheney. And if you think that ends, starting on Monday morning, I got a bridge over the Tigris River you can buy.
Donald Trump being banned from Twitter is not a small thing.
Not at all.
And, you know, we can have a debate about censorship, which I think is deeply concerning in this country, but I think most Republicans are glad Twitter has banned him and hope that they continue to do so.
I remember 145 Republicans stood with Liz Cheney.
Yes.
So it wasn't like they stood with Marjorie Taylor Greene. It wasn't like they stood with the Freedom Caucus folks on that issue. They stood with Liz Cheney, 145.
But let me challenge you a little bit. If as Rahm said, pursuing bipartisanship is a character issue for Joe Biden, where could he do that in a way that would be acceptable to you and other progressives?
You know, it starts with COVID relief. I don't know why we continue to pretend like Republicans and Democrats aren't suffering under the weight of this package. So for when Republicans to come in and lowball that offer, when their folks are suffering too, that should have been unifying. We should have passed that package. It was already a compromised position. So the idea that they asked to lowball, let's start with that.
$900 billion hasn't even been distributed yet.
Here's my thing.
Distributed yet. We've done there in the 1.9 trillion.
It's not an either or, and this is my point. You could, Cindy McCain, let's be real, Cindy McCain as an investor, great. Minimum wage is not going to make it through reconciliation. I don't think a $15 should just sit on the side of the road. Put it with some small business things that Republicans said and put it on the floor. You're going to get bipartisanship, and the public will be happy with progress. And if progress goes to Joe Biden's credit card.
Democrats are already negotiating our own position on $15 an hour, unfortunately. We don't need the Republicans to do that.
Stimulus package
you shouldn't reject that.
Is bloated, it's fat, it should fail. Here's the reality. Think about it. There's $130 billion for school reopening, and the teachers union, you know, basically shoved it to Biden and said no. So we're now going to give $130 billion to public schools that aren't going to
protect the
open.
Teachers and the family.
And the CDC says you don't have to. And the CDC says that schools could have reopened months ago, and the only reason they didn't, in my state, in other states, is because of the teachers union saying they don't want to go back. And you know who that's hurting them more than anybody else? Urban kids. Urban kids
who
are getting
adjusted their lives to make sure kids stay educated through this pandemic.
And they're not.
Are putting themselves at risk.
Urban kids are not being educated in this
People need to stand up and say,
still are
sanitation workers, grocery store workers, doctors went back to work, teachers need to go back to work too.
That's right. If the guy loading my produce at the supermarket can go back to work, a teacher can go back and start teaching an urban kid. They're failing our urban kids.
Follow the science.
Give them the vaccines they need and the protection they need before you send them back.
Fauci, he joins us live next. Thank you all very much. It's great to have you back.
Thanks.
Great to be back, George.
Trump plus. Even what McConnell did is extremely dangerous. In his speech, what he essentially messaged was, Trump did it, it was awful, but there's nothing we can do about it. That's even worse than saying, I don't think he did it, right? I would have preferred McConnell to go, I don't think he really incited anything, so I can't vote to convict. He said he did it, and there's nothing I'm going to do about it. That emboldens the entire movement. And I'm concerned that moving forward, we're going to see extremism amplified. And if Congress isn't going to solve it, the other elements of society have to step in. And I've written a column recently saying that the big tech companies, social media platforms, law enforcement need to step it up because Congress seems unwilling to do it.
Let me ask you about that, Frank. As you said, social media continues to play a role in amplifying these messages, disinformation. How then does the FBI and intelligence community police that?
Well, the good news is we've seen an unprecedented partnership between the big tech social media platforms and law enforcement. That needed to happen, and it's moving forward very encouragingly. But here's the downside of that. So we see people being suspended, taken down, apps and networks not being provided for extremist platforms. We see tens of thousands of employees come to work every day at the big tech platforms with the sole purpose of security and safety. All really good. FBI tipping off the big tech platforms, vice versa, but it's not regulated, Alicia. So this very Congress that couldn't come to agreement on what the president did being wrong is now the place we have to go to regulate speech, social media, violent rhetoric, and I don't see them stepping up. I don't see them embracing a domestic terrorism statute, let alone regulating big tech. We're in for a world of hurt, and if you leave it to law enforcement and social media, private sector, to figure this out, we may see problems with our civil liberties and free speech.
Now, it wasn't just Ron DeSantis that they were smearing. At the time, we were going through a presidential election, and while they were promoting Andrew Cuomo as the great oracle of response to the coronavirus, they were conducting the flu d'etat against our president, acting as though everything he was doing was causing this virus to be more deadly. The reality is the 45th president put us on the path to the fastest, safest vaccine development the world has ever known. And, we are still seeing the consequence of President Trump's actions in the saving of lives. And sadly, we're only starting to unearth the extent to which the actions of Governor Cuomo cost lives, because when people died as a consequence of their policy decisions, they recategorized those deaths as deaths in a hospital. So someone could get infected in a nursing home, get moved to the hospital, and then they cooked the books to make that a hospital death, not a nursing home death. And they were doing it to cover up the choices that they made that put blood on their hands.
Well, and the sad part is that each individual who died, and I think now we're up to more than 13,000 of individuals in this situation, they had no idea what was going on. They couldn't talk to their relatives. They couldn't be with their relatives. And I understand from some of the EMTs and the ambulance drivers who took them to the hospital that they would make a phone call for them before they died. And when they got out, they didn't even know what to expect. They didn't know where they were going. But let's talk about, what will happen. You've been in government long enough to know, do you think that the Attorney General in New York or the Department of Justice will investigate this in a fair and judicial way?
Oh, I have no confidence in the United States Department of Justice. That has become an institution of political hackery. There is a long-standing tension, though, that exists between attorneys general in the state of New York and governors. Andrew Cuomo knows that well. He rather famously bristled and had conflict with the governor when he was the attorney general. And so I'm actually more confident in the state of New York pursuing this than I am the U.S. Department of Justice. You've already seen Joe Biden give Governor Cuomo the warm embrace at the White House. That was a signal to his Department of Justice that for the sake of politics, they do not want criminal accountability in this case.
We'll pass many milestones, moments that define you and drive you.
Are in the presence of greatness.
Fox Sports celebrates and honors the black sports pioneers who made American history.
For impact.
Friday nights.
And Bobby, hope you're enjoying Radioactive Best of Daytona. If you like Radioactive, like what you saw, like what you heard, make sure you check out